They walked me out of my own building on a Wednesday morning in March. Not fired, restructured. That was the word my son-in-law used. He said it the way people say passed away instead of died. Like a softer word changes what it actually is. I carried a cardboard box with a coffee mug, a framed photo of my wife, and a small ceramic rooster my daughter had painted for me when she was 7. Security. A kid named Pete, who I'd hired personally 3 years ago, held the lobby door open and didn't look me in the eye. I didn't say anything. I put the box in my trunk, sat in the driver's seat, and watched the building for a long minute. Calloway Provisions, my father's name on the sign, my grandfather's recipe in every product on those shelves. Then I drove to my attorney's office. Let me back up. My family started Calloway Provisions in 1961. My grandfather, a man who came to Kentucky from eastern Tennessee with $40 in the truck, began selling smoked meats and canned preserves out of a converted barn. By the time my father inherited the business in the late 70s, it had grown into a regional distribution operation with accounts across 6 states. By the time I took over from my father, I was 31. He had his first heart attack, and there was no one else. We had 82 employees and a facility in Louisville that we'd just finished expanding. I spent 24 years building Calloway Provisions into something my grandfather would not have recognized, but absolutely would have been proud of. We went from regional to national. We brought on a full logistics team, modernized the cold chain operation, added 3 product lines. By last year, we had over 300 employees and contracts with grocery chains in 40 states. I never had a son. I had a daughter, Lily, who I raised mostly alone after her mother passed when Lily was 12. Lily is smart and kind and has her great-grandfather's stubbornness in the best possible way. She studied business at University of Kentucky, came to work for me right after graduation, and worked her way up through the company the honest way. She knew every department. She knew every manager by name. She knew the products. Then she married Preston. Preston Holt came from money. Not old money, new money, the kind that comes with a certain loudness about it. His family had sold a logistics software company in his mid-20s, and he'd been riding that wave ever since. He had an MBA from Vanderbilt, a firm handshake, and a way of talking about business that sounded impressive until you listened closely and realized he was mostly repeating things he'd read in airport books. Lily loved him. That was enough for me to give him a chance. When my doctor told me I needed to step back, stress, blood pressure, the same warning signs that had knocked my father down at 60, I made a decision I thought was temporary. I brought Preston in as CEO, gave him full operational authority, and moved myself into a quiet advisory role. I kept my office. I kept my title as chairman. And I kept what I had always kept: the controlling interest in the company, held in a family trust my father had structured decades ago, and that I had updated twice with my own attorney. 91%. I owned 91% of Calloway Provisions through that trust. Preston knew I was the majority owner. He'd signed documents acknowledging it, but I think, and I've had a long time to sit with this, I think he convinced himself over time that advisory meant retired, that my stepping back was permanent, that the company was, in some practical sense, now his. The first year was fine. Preston made some changes I didn't love, new branding, some management reshuffling, but nothing that crossed a line. I told myself I was being old-fashioned. I told myself this is what transition looks like. The second year is when things started to crack. He brought in a consultant from Nashville, a firm called Apex Operational Partners, and gave them a contract to optimize our human capital structure. That phrase, right there, should have told me everything: human capital structure. These were people who had worked for my family for decades. My warehouse manager, a man named Denny, had started as a loader when he was 19 and worked for us for 31 years. He was gone inside 4 months of Apex arriving. I heard about it secondhand. Preston didn't tell me. When I asked, he said it was a difficult but necessary decision and that Denny had been compensated appropriately. I called Denny myself. His severance was 8 weeks. I told Preston that wasn't acceptable. He nodded, said he understood my concern, and did nothing. I should have acted then. I know that. The most common thing people say when I tell this story is, "Why did you wait?" And I've asked myself that question more than anyone else ever could. The honest answer is that Lily was pregnant with their first child, that Preston and I had started to build something that felt, cautiously, like a real relationship. that I was afraid of what pulling back the curtain would do to my daughter's marriage and my relationship with my grandchild before they were even born. I kept waiting for him to course correct. He didn't. Over the following 6 months, he eliminated the employee profit-sharing program my father had started in 1988. He restructured the health benefits package in a way that cost our lower-wage workers significantly more out of pocket. He moved our primary distribution contract away from a local carrier we'd worked with for 15 years to a national company that offered slightly better per-unit rates and was, I later found out, a company in which Preston's brother held a minority stake. That last one was the one that woke me up completely. I went to his office. His actual office, the office that used to be mine, and I sat across from him and I said, "Preston, you have to know that routing a contract to your brother's business without board disclosure is a conflict of interest. This isn't a style choice. This is a legal issue." He leaned back in his chair, and I will never forget the way he looked at me. "I appreciate your concern," he said, "but the board reviewed the decision." "The board is 2 people and your college roommate," I said. "It was unanimous," he said. That was the moment I knew he had fully stopped seeing me as the owner of the company. I was the father-in-law, the old man who used to run things, a figure to be managed. I drove home. I called my attorney, a woman named Frances who had handled my family's legal matters for over 20 years. I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she said, "You've been more patient than most people would be. Let's talk about what the trust document actually allows you to do." The answer, it turned out, was quite a lot. The Calloway Family Trust had been updated most recently 6 years ago, and among the provisions my father's original attorney had insisted on, and that Frances had reinforced when I updated it, was a clause that allowed the controlling trust beneficiary to assume direct operational authority at any time, without a board vote, upon written notice delivered to all officers of the company. No supermajority required. No waiting period beyond 72 hours. No appeal mechanism for management. My father had insisted on it because he'd watched a cousin lose a family business to a board dispute in the 1970s. "You built it," he used to say. "Never let anyone take it from you on a technicality." I sat with that document for 2 more months. I wanted to be sure. I wanted to give Preston one more chance to do the right thing without me having to force it. I watched. I documented. I talked to employees quietly, carefully, people who'd been with the company long enough to trust me, and who were worried enough about what was happening to be honest. Then Preston restructured me out. He sent a company-wide email. I received it along with everyone else, announcing a leadership refinement that eliminated the chairman's advisory role and thanked me for my decades of foundational contribution. My keycard stopped working that afternoon. Pete held the door. I sat in my attorney's office with my cardboard box and my ceramic rooster, and Frances looked at me and said, "Ready?" I said yes. She filed the notice that afternoon, delivered by certified mail and by process server simultaneously to Preston and to each named officer of the company. The notice was 3 pages. The relevant part was 1 paragraph. It said, in the formal language of the trust document, that effective 72 hours from receipt, the controlling beneficiary of the Calloway Family Trust was assuming direct operational authority over Calloway Provisions in accordance with Section 14B of the trust agreement. We didn't need a board vote. We didn't need Preston's agreement. We didn't need anything except the document my father had made sure to include 30 years ago. I'm told Preston called his own attorney within an hour of receiving service. I'm told there was a great deal of phone activity over the next 24 hours, but the trust document was unambiguous. Frances had been careful, and when his attorney reviewed it, they apparently told him what she had told me. There was no mechanism to contest it. I also, quietly and separately, provided documentation of the undisclosed contract with his brother's company to the company's outside auditors. That process was separate and is still ongoing as I'm telling you this. I'll leave that part of the story there. 72 hours after the notice was served, I walked back into Calloway Provisions. Not through the lobby with a cardboard box this time, through the executive entrance, with Frances beside me and a letter in my hand that I had written myself the night before. Not a legal document, just a letter to the employees, the kind my grandfather would have written on yellow legal pad paper. I gathered everyone in the main floor of the facility, the way my father used to do on the first Friday of every month. 311 people. Some of them had been there since before Preston arrived and were barely keeping the worry off their faces. Some of them were newer and didn't entirely understand what was happening. All of them had shown up that morning and done their jobs, because that's what the people who work at Calloway Provisions do. I stood in front of them and I said, "This is still a family company. It was built by my grandfather and my father and me, and by every person in this building who ever loaded a truck or balanced a ledger or picked up the phone for a customer. That has not changed. That will not change." There was a long moment of quiet. Then Denny. I had called him 2 days before to ask if he'd come back, and he'd said yes before I finished the sentence, started clapping from the back of the room. He wasn't even officially back yet, he just showed up. The room followed. I'm not telling you this story because I think I did everything right. I didn't. I waited too long. I let people get hurt. Good people. Loyal people. Because I was trying to spare my daughter pain and give a man more chances than he deserved. That's something I have to carry. If I had moved 6 months earlier, Denny would have kept his job without interruption. Others would have kept their benefits. The contract situation might not have escalated the way it did, but I'll tell you what I learned. My grandfather didn't build this company to hand it to the most impressive sounding person at the table. He built it to last. Lasting requires protecting it, not just when it affects you personally, but when it affects the people who show up every day and make it what it is. That's a lesson I should have applied sooner, and I won't make that mistake again. Preston and Lily separated 8 months after I resumed control. That was not something I wanted and not something I caused. At least, I don't believe I caused it. Lily told me, the evening she came to tell me she'd asked him to move out, that she'd seen the contract documentation I'd given to the auditors. She sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee she didn't drink, and she said, "I didn't know about his brother, Dad." I believed her. I still believe her. She's back with the company now, as COO, a role she earned and deserves. We don't talk about Preston much. When we do, she's more measured than I am. She got her great-grandfather's stubbornness, but also, somehow, her mother's grace. The ceramic rooster is back on my desk. The sign still says Calloway Provisions. I don't know what my grandfather would have said about all of it, but I think he would have recognized it, the part that mattered, the part where you fight for the thing your family built, not because it has your name on it, but because of every person whose livelihood depends on you getting it right. That's the only reason any of it ever mattered anyway. The ceramic rooster is still on my desk. I look at it sometimes when I'm signing documents or taking a call, and I think about the morning I carried it out in a cardboard box. It's a small, ugly thing my daughter made when she was 7. It means more to me than anything else in that office. I've thought a lot about what this whole experience actually cost, not in legal fees or lost contracts or the disruption to the business. Those things have a number attached to them and numbers can be recovered. I mean what it cost in the quieter ways. The employees who lost their profit sharing. Denny, who worked for my family for 31 years and got 8 weeks of severance and a handshake. The people whose health coverage quietly got worse while I was giving Preston the benefit of the doubt. Those costs don't show up on a balance sheet and they don't go away when you fix the situation. That's the part I have to own. I had the means to act, and I waited, and real people absorbed the consequences of my waiting. I told myself I was playing the long game. I told myself I was being patient, but there's a difference between patience and avoidance, and I spent too long on the wrong side of that line. Wisdom isn't just knowing what you're capable of, it's knowing when the moment demands you use it, even when using it is uncomfortable, even when it costs you something personally. What undid Preston wasn't bad luck. It was the natural weight of choices that compound over time. Every corner he cut, every person he treated as expendable, every conflict of interest he papered over with a unanimous board vote. Those things accumulated. The trust document didn't save the company. The trust document was just the mechanism. What saved the company was that the foundation my grandfather laid was honest, and dishonest things eventually crack when they're built on top of something solid. I'm not a philosophical man by nature. I grew up in a warehouse. I learned business by watching my father take calls at the dinner table and drive the truck himself when a driver called in sick. What I understood from all of that, without having words for it when I was young, is that integrity isn't a reputation strategy. It's operational. The way you treat the person loading the truck is the same energy that comes back to you when you need someone to stay late on a hard week. That's not karma in any mystical sense. It's just cause and effect played out over years in people. Preston was intelligent. He had credentials and instincts, and he could work a room. What he lacked was the willingness to do right by people when doing right cost him something. That gap between being smart and being decent is where things fell apart for him. And Lily. She carries her great-grandfather's stubbornness and her mother's grace, and watching her step into the COO role and do it the right way has been the part of this whole story I'm most grateful for. She didn't inherit a company, she earned a place in it, and she understood from the beginning that the company is not separate from the people who make it run. That's the thing I'd want anyone to take from all of this. The documents matter. The legal structure matters. But what actually holds a thing together over generations is whether the people at the top have the character to protect everyone who depends on them. Not just when it's easy, not just when it affects them personally, but every single time it counts. My grandfather came to Kentucky with $40. He understood that before the rest of it.